Gather round the hearth, my fellow Dawi, and welcome to the showdown between the Dwarves, who shall be led by a Rune Lord, and the Dark Elves, who are going to be helmed by a Supreme Sorceress with the Lore of Fire. So it's a bit of an unusual pick. I have been seeing this a little bit on ladder, and essentially the idea or school of thought, at least how I understand it, is that they get the Supreme Sorceress, they get Fireball. It's really cheap, allows you to go wider with the rest of your army, and basically you just use the Fireball to snipe out artillery pieces. So if he's able to snipe my cannons, for example, it's going to give him more battlefield control. He's going to be able to kind of pick his engagements more. He's not going to be forced in by my cannons. So there is a little bit of an advantage to that. Granted, I still don't think it's the most optimal not school of thought, but line of play. I think that using some of the other lores of magic is going to be a little bit more effective. Like Soul Stealer is pretty good. Mark of Pain is always good in those infantry fights. And I mean, there's a number of other options. I mean, even Death can be okay against Dwarves for the most part. But yeah, I mean, it's still not bad. Sniping artillery and the Supreme Sorceress on the Pegasus with just Fireball is going to cost like nothing. It's got to cost like, what, 900 gold or something? So it does allow for a lot of other stuff in his army. So for my force, we do have a Vanguard of Miners with blasting charges, and these guys they're the frontal spear of the Dwarven army. Going to be dropping some blasting charges, just kind of teasing a little bit, but obviously they're not going to win any of the engagements they do fight. But if the Dark Elves do go with a more chaff-centric army using like Bleak Swords and Dread Spears, well, you're not going to see Dread Spears, but Bleak Swords, the blasting charges can do some good work, and even against like Sisters of Slaughter and things like that, the blasting charges do hurt. So I think Miners with blasting charges, a pretty good tip of the spear. And like I said, when you're playing Dwarves, and I say all the time, it's really an onion. You got to force them to come through layers, and just putting them out in Vanguard here means another line of infantry they have to stop, they have to deal with before they can progress and get to the final boss lurking in the back here, which is the Runesmith. So for the front line, it's going to be Dwarf Warriors with great weapons. And these guys, for the cost, I think they're pretty solid. They have relatively low melee attack, but melee defense is good for a great weapon unit that costs that little. Decent, leadership, decent weapon strength. They're basically just going to be holding. They're the second wave of defense here, and with a little bit of rune support. So if you have like Runes of Wrath and Ruin or the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin, they can actually put up an okay fight, even against elite infantry like Hargoneth Executioners. You can see here my cannons are tearing into those Dark Shards. Definitely quite happy about that. And now this is the real bread and butter of the army. We're going to be going with the Triple Thunderer. So these guys, pretty self-explanatory, just hard-hitting, direct fire, really good against Dark Elves, good against Chariots, good against Flyers, good against, elite infantry. They're just a solid pick, and I think they're a staple of most Dwarf builds here in this matchup. We got a Rune Lord as well, and a Runesmith, going to be dropping the sweet base with those Runes of Wrath and Ruin. We have Giant Slayers in the back, and I do like having one group of Giant Slayers in conjunction with Dragonback Slayers, because if they do spam elite infantry, there's a couple ways Dark Elves play this matchup. They either, for one, go in with a bunch of elite infantry, Hargoneth Executioners, and just try and cut you down through attrition, or they go with a bunch of Chariots, which is the more competitive way to play it, in my opinion. But Giant Slayers are good against both those options. They can fight elite armored infantry because they have good AP, and they're also really good against big armored Chariots. So in the back, we have Dragonback Slayers who are going to be guarding 2 cannons. So normally I'm not, don't go too crazy on the cannons, but I wanted to try it out based on the map. I knew this map was, pretty easy to defend, right? You kind of caddy up here and you're able to get some good fire. So I was hoping it would be efficient. We got 2 gyrocopters up in the sky. And again, when I'm going with cannons, I want to have something that's a bit of a distraction in the front that's going to be forcing my opponent to fall back and deal with it while he's taking cannon fire. It kind of halts his advance. And the gyrocopters with steam cannons, pretty decent against light armor, and this gives you some good battlefield utility. So we're going to be trying those out. For my opponent's force, he's got a Supreme Sorceress, front line of Hargoneth Executioners. Blackheart Corsairs, a bit of an interesting pick, but, they are somewhat durable with 80 armor and relatively cheap. He's got Dark Shards across the whole back line here, well, I guess front line right now, but the Dark Shards can do some work against Dwarves for sure. I mean, they have less range than Thunders, but with Silver Shields and good armor-piercing values, they can do a lot of damage for sure. But really, the meat of his army is going to be 5 groups of Hargoneth Executioners, just going deep in those guys. And if they get into my lines unfettered, it is going to be really, really rough for sure. So that's pretty much it, guys. Let's get this show on the road and see if we can satisfy the grudge. So cannons are going to be going in, tearing into these Dark Elf forces. And yes, cannons are meant versus big targets, but with saturated volume of fire, they can do some pretty good work even against infantry. And you can see here we're tearing into these Dark Elves, killing 3 to 5 models with each cannonball, which is quite good. Dwarf cannons are quite accurate. So we do break off those Dark Shards. And the fireballs in the meantime, my opponent trying to snipe here. And it looks like he's not having too much success, although it looks like he may have just gotten 1. So there you go. So that's kind of the purpose there. Now I'm down to 5 cannons. Right as I say he's not having success, I totally jinxed that. But the cannon is able to take out 1, and if he wants to, I mean, he can keep playing this game. But I think I'm going to be getting the upper hand in this trade, just with the cannon shooting. I mean, it's going to take him a while to get all of my cannons here. Had I just brought 1, his style of play and kind of thought here would be a little bit more efficient, but for the most part with 2 cannons, I think it's going to be a little bit tricky. So gyrocopters right now, I'm basically just going to be flying over to screen out my opponent as he does advance now. So realizing it's not going to be an optimal trade, he advances his entire army, and these steam cannons are going to be trying to drop some fire here on this foul Dark Elf Sorceress, and it looks like we get a little bit of damage. 71 leadership is nice, but my opponent clearly knows that you can actually do some jukes here in the canyon, and he's going up and down, and it's actually really hard to hit that character. So right here you can see that the Thunder is going to be shooting as well, but he's juking really efficiently. Definitely some very solid micro in that respect. And here you can see the Dark Shards do open up on the Miners. They definitely take a beating, so that's some rough stuff for sure. And the Dark Shards are going to be advancing, but my cannons, I'm just methodically going from Dark Shard to Dark Shard, trying to take those guys out. And he does have the Bolt Fiends as well, and the Shield Breaker is actually not bad in this matchup. Thunders, for example, are shielded. So cannons are going to be shooting into the Bolt Fiends, and I will be switching on to the Elite Infantry because that's going to be more of the issue here. At least we took out about half the models on this group and, a fair amount on this group here. And the Gyrocopters, in the meantime, just running interference, trying to just kind of occupy the attention of some of his forces, to take the pressure off the rest of my army. So yeah, where things are going to get really ugly is when he gets close. So I do drop a Rune of Wrath and Ruin on the Harganeth Executioners here, and my Rune Lord on the far side is going to be dropping the Master on the Harganeth Executioners as well. The Dawi guns have opened up, and they're going to be unleashing torrents of fire into those Harganeth Executioners as they do advance. And I have a nice kill box here. I can actually fall back. I have one group position back here, so we're just going to be retreating, and you don't have to take the fight. Like, I don't have to charge up and meet him. That's something that I see a lot of newer players doing. They're just like, I have to go fight. Let's send my front line into his. Don't do it until you absolutely have to if you're at a disadvantage in terms of unit strength. So here we're going to be falling back, getting some really nice crossfire with these Dawi guns here. The Harganeth Executioners are certainly getting pounded. And in the back, we're going to be using the Gyrocopters to actually attack the Dark Shards, which is a good usage of them. Here, cannons are still shooting in against the Elite Infantry, and my guns are opening up. This flank is certainly going to be a little bit ugly. I don't have as much space to work with here. So the Runesmith is going to be surging in with some Dwarf Warriors against those guys. And basically, we're just pulling back the Harganeth Executioners. We're falling back with the Dwarf Warriors, forming another kill box here. And yes, he's going to be getting through with quite a few troops here, but we're not going to fight them until we have to, like I said. Dwarf Warriors are falling back here. We're getting some really good crossfire. Those guns are just doing so much damage against those guys. Plus, with the Gyrocopters actually shooting in the back, it's really going to be punishing on their leadership. So right here, my Thunders do kind of get inundated for a moment. So I send them in temporarily, and then I send in the Giant Slayers. So Giant Slayers are going to chop up Blackheart Corsairs. It's going to be pretty good there. I mean, they're not giants, but hey, it is what it is. On the far side, Dwarf Warriors, I ran them over to this edge of the map, figuring that if they're going to be losing a fight, let's lose far away from my guns. So I sent them over here, and the Harganeth Executioners should be taking them out relatively easily. The guns are still shooting, and we're getting some pretty good damage against his Elite Infantry, but he's also breaking through the front line. Harganeth and Blackheart Corsairs are getting in, and now Dark Shards have position, and they're certainly going to be a bit of an issue, but we were able to stabilize back here, which is good. And more importantly, our cannons are still online, and I have reserves, so even if he does charge back here with Corsairs or these elite troops here, my Dragonback Slayers can intercept and potentially do some good work. Here, the Dwarf Warriors do break through, which is really big for me, actually, because now these Dwarf Warriors can surge into the back line and attack the Dark Shards and potentially do some really good damage. Here in the center, the Giant Slayers, a pretty solid backline defensive unit, like I said. Against Chariots, they're going to do pretty good. And even against these Armored Infantry, these Proud Slayers are going to be actually putting a dent. Regular Slayers normally would have a little bit of trouble with that. And you can see my opponent here is going to be dropping a Fireball as well. And let's see how he's done with that. So it looks like 2 cannons here and 1 cannon here. So over the course of the battle, he has done some pretty good work against my cannons with that Fireball. Yeah, 1 and 1. So I mean, not bad, really. Here you can see the Rune Lord's going to be jumping on the Dark Shards, Dwarf Warriors here, and now this is good because Gyrocopters, I can simply just jump on top of the Dark Shards and use them as an interruption tool. So I'm quite happy about that. The first Bladed Storm is going to be coming in here, hitting those Dark Shards, and a little bit of crossfire coming in, but I definitely need to get my other ones engaged, but it looks like the Supreme Sorceress is going to be chasing me down. So on the side of the battlefield, the flank, as expected, did get collapsed pretty bad. Those Thunders and Dwarf Warriors are going to be getting chased off the field, but I was able to heavily secure this position, and more importantly, 2 of my 3 guns are still online, which is going to be great. I have Runes of Wrath and Ruin, I have Slayers to kind of run interference, so I'm going to be able to slow these guys, and you can see these Harganeth Executioners have been slapped with the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin. The Dawi sing this day, and now the cannons and gunfire are going to be pouring in. All my Thunders have been given orders to take these guys down, bring it down, and they're going to be just unleashing a volley of fire here. And once he does get close enough, the Dragonback Slayers are going to be charging, and they have a charge bonus of 26. Pretty good combat stats to boot, but man, these guys are just getting pounded by the Dwarven guns. You can see a lot of damage coming in. Harganeth Executioners doing work. Cannonballs point blank, missing, unfortunately, but, it's okay. Dwarves are firing, but did I miss their volleys, or they've been shooting, right? Yeah, they're shooting. A little bit obstructed here, but the gunfire is certainly doing a lot of work. But yeah, now there's going to be a big onslaught. So my other pocket here, the Miners and the remnants of the Giant Slayers plus the Runesmith are going to be jumping in here. Dragonback Slayers are going to be rushing in to intercept these guys. I'm not sure what happened to that attack order right there. But we are able to hold back the tide. And that group of Harganeth Executioners got taken from like 80% to like 0 from the Rune of Wrath and Ruin and the Overwatch fire coming in from the Thunders. And up here on the high ground, the Rune Lord is quite proud of himself. He's going to be chasing down these Bolt Fiends right here, and the Dwarf Warriors, who were able to get into the back line, have done a pretty good job chasing down the Thunders. Or not Thunders, but the Dark Shards. That's heresy. And it looks like some Harganeth Executioners may be able to come back and clean up these Dwarf Warriors. But man, Dwarf Warriors, even for like a low tier unit that costs like 500 gold, they hold a long time. I mean, taking Dark Shard fire to the back, like fighting elite infantry, I'm proud of those guys. They did good. Ancestors will sing their names for sure. Gyrocopter here in the distance. It's getting hunted by the Supreme Sorceress, which is fine. It's taking her away from the battle, so I'm more than happy for him to kind of chase that around the battlefield. And now you can see, after a very hard-fought battle, the Dwarves have resecured their backline, and 2 cannons are still online. So the cannon's tearing into these Hargoneth Executioners right here, and the Rune Lord's just kind of, he's hustling. His 120 armor doing him proud, and yeah, he's basically just chasing the Bolt Fiends. And now my guns have moved up, and even though the Dark Shards do trade relatively efficiently with Thunders with their silver shields, they're still taking a hammering because of just the volume of fire. 46 models and 60 here, so 106 models against 52. That's going to heavily favor my gun line. So right here, it looks like the Supreme Sorceress is going to be coming back in, maybe to drop some more fireballs and try and finish off the cannons here. A Rune of Wrath and Ruin is going to be going down on the Hargoneth Executioners, trying to slow those bad boys down to allow me to kind of saturate them with more fire. And are they getting it? Yeah, they're getting the cannons for sure. And the last of these giant slayers, definitely fulfilling their Slayer's Oath. They'll be remembered, to say the least. 102 kills in these bad boys, 36 models. I really hope this guy lives through the battle, but I just don't think he is. He's like charging into these, like all these infantry here. Oh, and he lives! What a hero! What a hero! And that's going to be it. It's the Dark Elf army does break. Man! So that was a really fun battle. Like I said, there's a couple ways the Dark Elves can play that matchup. One, of course, is using chariots and mobility, and I think that's the more efficient. It's really tough for Dwarfs to deal with that. Granted, they can with Slayers and efficient spatial control using the Thunders and the Cannons. Although I think my build would have been pretty good against chariots, because essentially you use double cannons to blast them, thunders shoot them as well, 2 layers of slayers to kind of intercept them, plus the gyrocopters, you actually use them to countercharge the chariots and pin them in place, because gyros have good mass. That was my whole school of thought. But it ended up being pretty good against the elite infantry build as well, so I'm pretty happy with how this performed. I definitely like the build quite a bit. And yeah, give it a try. It's a little bit touchy. You have to pull back. You can't give them the engagements they want. You have to pull them through the fire a little bit. But if you do that, I think it can be pretty good. For my opponent's build, it's a classic. Just spamming what is good against dwarves: elite infantry, elite AP infantry. A couple things I might change are the Black Art Corsairs. I think cutting these guys and mixing in a couple mobile units like Dark Riders. I mean, even like regular Dark Riders, they're very annoying for dwarves to deal with. They can maneuver around. They can pressure your guns, pressure your cannons. I was able to ignore defending my cannons at some points because I knew there was no big mobile threats from him. So just mixing in a couple Dark Riders or even like a single chariot or something would have been, I think, useful for sure. So that's just my 2 cents. So well played to my opponent, the Soviet Longbow. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the showdown between the Dwarves and the Dark Elves. And we'll see you next time, guys. Cheers.